Shalom. I'm Rabbi Susan Elkodsi of the Malverne Jewish Center, and welcome to my very first attempt at a podcast. I'd like to talk about this week's Torah portion, Korach. In the past, I've always used Korach as an example of how not to behave, what not to do. To give you a little bit of a background, Korach is a descendant of Levi, as are Moses and Aaron. His grandfather is Kohat. And if you remember from a couple of weeks ago, when it comes to the disposition of the portable Mishkan, the sanctuary in the wilderness, and its furnishings, the Levites were the ones responsible for basically doing the heavy work there, supporting the Kohanim. The Kohathites were responsible for moving and carrying the sacred objects, but they weren't allowed to touch them until the Kohanim, the priests, had finished their work. Otherwise, they might die. Now, Korach is an interesting individual. There's a juxtaposition here with last week's Parsha, which ended with the verses that we read in synagogue in the morning service regarding the tzitzit, the fringes that go on our four-cornered garments, along with the techelet, which is the thread of blue or purple that would go with it. And according to a rabbinic writing called Midrash, Korach was trying to be a thorn in Moses' side and said to Moses, basically, if one is wearing a garment all made of purple, does he still have to put the techelet on it? And Moses said yes, and Korach challenged him. But our Parsha opens with Korach getting about 250 of his closest friends together and charging Moses with trying to take all the glory for himself and for Aaron. Basically, what he says is, Madua titnasu al kahal Adonai. Why have you lifted yourselves up above the congregation of the Lord? As I started, when I was in high school, in my Algebra 2 and Trigonometry class, every so often someone would leave a saying on the blackboard. And one of my favorites was, no person is totally worthless. He can always serve as a bad example. And that's how I always saw Korach. Until this week when I read the Parsha again and looked at a Midrash called Midrash Tanchuma. And what the Midrash suggests is that Korach was actually jealous of Aaron and Moses. He didn't like playing second fiddle to the Kohanim. And we realize this when Moses says to him, isn't it enough for you that God has given you access to God to perform the duties of the Lord and to continually serve the people? Do you seek the priesthood too? And perhaps he does. So I'd like to suggest looking at Korach in a little bit of a different way and suggest two potential motives for Korach's behavior and attitudes. So in one respect, is this a case of always a bridesmaid, never a bride? The subordinate who has no opportunity to elevate his status or change his situation? Or is it more a question of not being satisfied with his position and believing that life would be better if only he had a better job with more prestige? Either way, it would seem that Korach didn't see a way out of his predicament, and he chose to incite a mutiny. And he got these 250 people, men who had good names, good reputations in the community, to spread dissent among the people. Let's suffice it to say that the rebellion did not go well, and Korach, along with his 250 closest friends and their families, were swallowed up by the earth. Now, if I had been Korach's chaplain, I might have asked if he felt a sense of despair over his situation, which would not be an inappropriate thing to ask. It's something I'm sure many of us can relate to. Life can be unfair, and when circumstances prevent us from achieving our goals, frustration can turn to anger and despair. It can lead to engaging in destructive activities. In Korach's case, it led to disaster. The deaths not just of those who were swallowed up, but the more than 14,000 who died in the plague that followed. What does this say for us today? In the past week, Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain took their own lives, along with countless others who are famous only to their family and friends. According to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, there are 123 suicides per day nationwide. Now, what defines a suicide and what Jewish tradition and teachings have to say about it is a discussion for another time. But the Talmud teaches us, Kol Yisrael arevim ze lazeh. All Israel is responsible one for the other. So what does this mean? Let's replace the word Israel with everyone, and add the rabbinic teaching, anyone who saves one life, it is as if he or she saved an entire world. Korach didn't have the support systems and services we have today. And even if he did, I'm not sure that he would have reached out. Hopefully, however, someone else might have reached out to him. We need to reach out. We need to reach inside ourselves. Despite the MASH theme song, suicide isn't painless. It hurts on so many levels. At this time, I pray that God will grant us the strength and awareness to see beyond and behind the facade that so many people present. May we have the wisdom and understanding to educate ourselves to become aware of the warning signs of mental illness. And may we also be present to walk a few steps in each other's shoes. Understanding and effort are the first steps. And as we're taught, it's not up to us to finish the task, but we are not free to desist from starting. I hope you have a good week. Shabbat Shalom, and enjoy the Torah reading.